Good afternoon, everyone. The first item of business today is portfolio questions on finance, employment and sustainable growth. Question 1, Dr Elaine Murray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government for what reason its planned investment in 2014-15 using the non-profit distributing model has decreased by £164 million since September 2012.
Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, in the short term, NPD investment is lower than originally forecast, as I set out in the budget statement. This is for two reasons. Firstly, some NPD projects are being concluded at less cost. Secondly, some projects are taking longer to be prepared and planned.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his reply. According to the Financial Scrutiny Unit's briefing on the draft budget of 2014-15, planned NPD investment this financial year is 45% less than estimated in September last year, and the projected spend for next year is down by 17%. How accurate are the current figures for planned NPD investment, or will they too be reduced again by September next year?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Government has committed itself to a programme of NPD investment covering a range of projects, some of which, of course, will be very material to Dr Murray's constituency in the Dumfries and Galloway Acute Services Redevelopment Project, amongst others. And the purpose of that programme is to deal with the reductions in capital expenditure that the Scottish Government has experienced as a consequence of the budget priorities of the United Kingdom Government. The Government is taking forward its programme designed to ensure that we deliver value for money, which is why some of the projects are coming in at a lower estimate than we expected, and I certainly think that's to be welcomed within Parliament. And some of the projects take longer to procure, purely for two reasons. Firstly, NPD investment of its nature is not as swift to deliver as capital expenditure in its traditional form. That's part of our argument as to why capital expenditure shouldn't have been reduced. And secondly, projects are of some complexity and involve a range of different factors to be planned and procured at the same time. And ensuring that we get projects off on the right footing is the correct approach to take to ensure that we maximise value for money for the public purse.
Many thanks. Gavin Brown.
Thank you. This year's NPD sees a drop from £338 million to £185 million. What percentage of that drop can be attributed to savings?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, some of it will be down to the reductions in costs that projects are being procured for. Some of it is down to the factors that I was explaining to Dr Murray just a moment ago in relation to the time it's taking to ensure those projects will be taking place. The key point to make to Parliament is the fact that all of the projects the Government has committed to undertaking will be undertaken as part of the NPD programme, and what the Government will do is ensure that the resources that support the delivery of these projects are in place as part of the programme, which we acknowledge to Parliament would take some time for us to deliver.
Many thanks. Question 2, Mary Fee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how its small business bonus scheme has helped businesses in West Scotland.
Minister Derek Mackay.
In Scotland, over 89,000 businesses' properties are benefiting from small business bonus, which is 2 out of 5 business premises in Scotland paying 0 or reduced business rates under the SBBS. Many thousands of businesses benefiting are located in the west of Scotland. With savings of up to £4,620 in this financial year, the scheme provides vital support and help to small businesses across the country in the current economic climate. In the next few weeks, the Minister for Energy, Enterprise and Tourism, Fergus Ewing, will write to every business to ensure that no one misses out across Scotland that may be eligible for a small business bonus but isn't claiming.
Thank you. Mary Fee.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Would the Minister agree with me that Renfrewshire Council's Retail Improvement Scheme, which has been very successful, is a creative and innovative scheme designed to support small businesses and shops and to improve the appearance of our high streets? And would the Scottish Government roll out the scheme across Scotland as part of the Town Centre review?
Derek Mackay.
I would agree with Mary Fee that such initiatives are well worthwhile. If I remember correctly, I think I started it when I was leader of Renfrewshire Council, which gave the successor administration a range of good ideas as to how we can support town centres across the country, and that's why I'm particularly looking forward to the Government's response to the External Advisory Group on town centres. But returning again to the small business bonus, I'm sure Mary Fee will welcome the fact that over 2,500 businesses in Renfrewshire benefited from the small business bonus to a value of over £4 million in rates relief, of course all opposed by the Labour Party.
Many thanks. Question 3, Hanzala Malik.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what programmes it has to reduce underemployment amongst ethnic minority people and support them in employment.
Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is taking a range of steps to address underemployment for all those affected in Scotland through both our work to promote stronger economic growth and reform of post-16 education and training to ensure that our skills provision meets the demands of current and future labour markets. In addition, specific equality programme funding between 2008 and 2015 will provide £5.756 million across 24 organisations working to improve employment and employability of black and minority ethnic communities across Scotland.
Hanzala Malik.
Thank you very much for that response. Whilst the ethnicity and employment information from the 2011 census has not come out, analysis based on the 2001 census showed that unemployment rates were higher for all visible minority groups, and some groups in particular were double the figures for the indigenous community. If the 2011 census analysis shows that the pattern persists, will the Minister commit to positive action on employment for Scottish growing ethnic minority population?
Cabinet Secretary.
Could I say at the outset of my answer to Mr Malik that the objective of ensuring that there are opportunities for all citizens in Scotland to fulfil their economic potential lies at the very heart of the Government's agenda. So therefore ensuring that for groups, minority ethnic communities within Scotland, it is fundamentally important to the Government that we provide the support that's necessary. In my original answer, I highlighted the specific equality programme funding that is available. But what I can say to Mr Malik is the Government will continue to monitor any new information that emerges, particularly the information that emerges out of the analysis of the 2011 census. And as part of our commitment to ensure that there are opportunities for all of our citizens to flourish, we will take whatever steps we can to support the journey into employability of people from ethnic minorities and to support them in those efforts.
Many thanks. Question 4 has not been lodged by Graham Pearson, and an explanation has been provided. Question 5, Alex Johnston.
To ask the Scottish Government how many jobs will be directly created as a result of offshore wind farm developments.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
The size of the offshore renewables market and its associated employment at present rests on the ambition of the UK Government to develop the market through the current electricity market reform. The Scottish Government continues to make the case for ambitious reforms to support the sector and is looking forward to a positive conclusion on the UK Government's current consultation.
Alex Johnson.
When a similar question was asked by the Scottish Conservatives regarding onshore wind, the First Minister initially stated that 18,000 were employed in the industry. He subsequently downgraded that to 11,000. Further work by the Scottish Conservatives indicated that the true number at the time was 2,235. At this time, when the Government are trying to promote offshore wind as a potential large-scale employer, would the Minister like to take the opportunity to downplay these ambitious claims that appear to have peppered previous contributions to the debate?
Minister.
Well, I always try to be realistic, but just yesterday I attended an event in Largs where Arriva announced their support of 16 young people to do a pre-apprenticeship wind technician training course at Fife College. Just last week I met with Repsol. I also met with SSE, who have 800 people employed in Scotland dependent on wind farms. I've also met with the EDF and EDPR in recent times, and Scottish Power, and all of these companies and many more are supportive of onshore and offshore wind. So I find it a bit difficult to understand the Conservative policy, since some members like Mr Johnson and Mr Fraser beside him seem to be opposed to wind farms. Some are for them, and indeed some have one of their own.
Question 6, Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what economic opportunities will arise from the decommissioning of oil and gas installations.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, decommissioning presents enormous opportunities. Estimates vary, but it is likely that this will be worth over £30 billion by 2040. This must be grasped by the Scottish supply chain. Moreover, this figure does not include the future international opportunities which are being considered by Scotland's enterprise agencies.
Thanks. Maureen Watt.
I thank the Minister for that reply. Does the Minister agree that the expertise Scotland will gain in decommissioning will be something similar to Scotland's expertise in operating subsea, which will give Scottish companies a competitive advantage in gaining future international contracts in this area, helping to further grow our supply chain companies and our exports?
Minister.
Yes, I do. Maureen Watt is very knowledgeable about the industry, and she knows that our subsea sector is preeminent in the world. That too should be the case in respect of decommissioning. I should say that we do not wish premature cessation of production. We wish fields to continue in production as long as they can, and indeed to maximise production. So we want to get the maximum benefit that we can, but plainly some installations do need to be decommissioned, and this is quite simply an enormous opportunity for Scotland. And there are concerns that because of investments in vessels such as the Peter Shelter and other investments by Norway, that the UK government may not be ready to grasp the thistle, as it were, and make sure that we do not lose these advantages. And finally, I recently attended a conference in St Andrews hosted by DCOM North Sea. It is plain there's huge interest at the moment. The Scottish Government fully honours our decommissioning responsibilities in the event that there is a yes vote in the referendum, and that will provide us with the most stable environment to ensure that Scotland has the competitive advantage in decommissioning, as it will in the oil and gas industry as a whole.
Many thanks. Question 7, Nigel Donn.
To ask the Scottish Government what economic measures the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Employment and Sustainable Growth can introduce to help improve towns.
Minister Derek Mackay.
Last week I launched the Town Centre Living Fund, which is aimed at bringing empty town centre properties back into use for affordable housing. We developed this fund in response to the early ideas emerging from the National Review of Town Centres. We're currently considering the final report and recommendations of the Town Centre Review Group, which we received in July. Our response to the report, which we will publish later this year, will set out further measures that the Scottish Government will take to help support and improve our town centres.
Thank you. Nigel Donn.
I thank the Minister for his response. I'm just wondering what our local communities can do to access that fund ahead of subsequent reports, and what help the Government thinks that will be able to provide to the economies of our towns.
Minister.
I would inform Mr Donn that the Town Centre Housing Fund is a £2 million demonstration project. It is what it says on the tin. It will demonstrate what can be achieved in terms of empty properties and having them repopulated, and potentially a conversion of the status of that property. So we're inviting housing associations, local authorities and private developers to consider bids for project funding from this. And I can say this is one of the early projects emerging from the work of the Town Centre strategy, which will, I am sure, send a very positive message across Scotland about our intentions to support our town centres. And this particular project is good because of its ambitions around the repopulation of town centres, a footfall strategy and tackling blight within our town centres. And incidentally, our 30,000 affordable homes target is very much on track.
Many thanks. Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. The Minister, I'm sure, has seen the comments from the Federation of Small Business that the closure of public counters in police stations will be bad for local economies. Would you agree that small towns like Blairgowrie and Mr Swinney's constituency will be adversely affected if these closures go ahead?
Minister.
Well, I think these issues have to be considered in round, and I can tell the member, Mr Fraser, that as part of the town centre response, we will look very closely at public sector properties and the role that they play within town centres. Indeed, one of the recommendations from the external advisory group is to have a town centre presumption, both in planning and in terms of the assets of the public sector, and that's something the Government is actively considering and will be reported on once we release the Government strategy as it relates to town centres. But clearly, footfall in town centres is of great importance and will be a key consideration in any action that the Government takes.
Many thanks. Question 8, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with Aberdeen City Council regarding economic development.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is in regular discussion with Aberdeen City Council regarding economic development. I met the Leader and Chief Executive of the Council in July, and the Deputy First Minister met them again in August. Ongoing engagement takes place through the activities of the Scottish Cities Alliance, which recognises the role cities play as drivers of economic growth and which aims to increase investment and jobs in our cities and their surrounding regions. Both the Deputy First Minister and the Leader of Aberdeen City Council attended its recent leadership group meeting in September.
Thank you. Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Leader of Aberdeen City Council appeared in front of the Local Government and Regeneration Committee today and talked about Aberdeen's vibrant economy and also talked about various funding streams, but no mention of TIF, which of course could lead to greater economic growth. Has there been any discussions or application from Aberdeen City Council for TIF funding since their decision to abandon the City Garden project scheme?
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary.
The last application from the City Council for a TIF project was in August 2000. Well, there's been no application since the last August, so there has been nothing that would constitute an application in terms of the point that Mr Stewart has made. The Government, of course, made clear our willingness to take forward the TIF proposition conditional on a project emerging that took forward the Union Terrace Gardens project, which was, of course, supported by the population in Aberdeen, but it's a matter of regret that that project has not been able to proceed, despite the public support that's been expressed for the project.
Many thanks. Lewis MacDonald.
The Cabinet Secretary will recall the great disappointment in Aberdeen that the promised sum of several millions of pounds in business rates incentivisation did not, in fact, materialise in the latest financial year. Can the Cabinet Secretary offer any better hope that Aberdeen will get a benefit directly from its great success in increasing its level of business rates generation and indeed the level of economic activity in the city over the last 12 months?
Secretary.
Well, as Mr MacDonald should know, if he was following the sequence of parliamentary questions that are asked on this subject, Mr Mackay dealt with this issue just the other week there in response to parliamentary questions. And Mr Mackay essentially made 2 points in that answer, which I'll reiterate today. The first is that the business rates incentivisation scheme is designed to ensure that authorities that have exceeded targets that are set that are not influenced in any way by exceptional circumstances around the valuation process or the appeals process, which has been the case in relation to the business rates incentivisation targets that we've put in place, that those authorities are able to share in the proceeds of those achievements. Now, we've discussed with local government the fact that the revaluation process and the appeals process has essentially delayed some of the application of decisions into the business rates scheme, and that would essentially have distorted some of the outcome that would be in the business rates incentivisation scheme assessment. The second point that Mr Mackay made was that, in actual fact, when we analysed in response to some of the points that have been made, the valuation base in Aberdeen, we did in fact see that the valuation base fell. So the point that Mr MacDonald has founded his argument on, that somehow there is a valuation benefit to Aberdeen that should accrue into the business rates incentivisation scheme, is not actually borne out by the facts of this circumstance. So I hope that helps him in answering the issue that he's raised. And of course, local government has said that they do not want to conclude the discussions that we have embarked on about the business rates incentivisation scheme until there is an audit of the 2012-13 data, which will not be completed until the spring of 2014. So if local authorities want to proceed expeditiously on this matter, I suggest that they go back and reconsider the decision that they've taken in that respect.
Many thanks. Question 9, John Wilson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it monitors the Business Gateway contract in Lanarkshire.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Responsibility for the management, performance and monitoring of the delivery of the Business Gateway services across Lanarkshire rests with North Lanarkshire Council. North Lanarkshire Council works in partnership with South Lanarkshire Council to ensure that the service is addressing the needs of both local authority areas. The Scottish Government is a member of the Business Gateway Management Group, and the Management Group receives reports on the performance of the service across Scotland.
Many thanks. John Wilson.
I thank the Minister for his response. As the Minister is aware that despite going through the official Journal of European Union tender process to deliver the Lanarkshire Business Gateway contract, only one tender submission was received, with the contract being awarded to Lanarkshire Enterprise Services Limited. Could the Minister indicate whether this tendering situation has been repeated in other business gateway areas, and will we closely monitor the delivery of business gateway services in Lanarkshire to ensure the maximum impact of the £6.8 million contract?
Minister.
Well, I can look into and report back to the member on the specific point that he makes, but plainly it is the responsibility of local authorities, local government, to determine how best they deliver business gateway services, and rightly so. It sometimes occurs that there are few or even only a single response. That occurs, and it is not in any way unique, I would suggest to the member. Lanarkshire Enterprise Services were the successful tenderer. They were also successful in winning bids for the service in Ayrshire and Renfrewshire. Lanarkshire Enterprise Services is an enterprise trust, a private sector not-for-profit organisation. Its chief executive is Ronnie Smith. I have had many dealings with Ronnie Smith. He has always evinced strong leadership and support for business. I hope and have confidence that that will be the case in respect of the new duties he has in serving Lanarkshire.
Thank you. Question 10, Claire Baker.
To ask the Scottish Government how it supports Fife's economy.
The Secretary, John Swinney.
President Officer, the Scottish Government is committed to supporting sustainable economic growth across Scotland, including in Fife, and we're using all available levers to deliver that growth. We have focused our budget on delivering investment, protecting household incomes and creating jobs. Just last week I heard direct from business attending the Fife Economic Partnership their view on what would support growth and how we can support them. The impact of our strong support has been felt across the economy in Fife, from our investment in major infrastructure projects such as the Queensferry Crossing, which is currently employing 700 people on site, to business support from Scottish Enterprise, which account manages over 100 companies, as well as the Small Business Bonus Scheme, which is benefiting over 5,500 small businesses.
Many thanks. Claire Baker.
With a number of major towns, Fife high streets are a vital part of our economy and our communities. The UK Government is currently consulting on planning rules to encourage change of use from retail to residential. And following on from Nigel Dawn's question, I do welcome the fund that's been announced earlier this week. Can the Cabinet Secretary say if the Scottish Government will take steps to overcome the identified barriers around the restrictions on the selling of long leaseholds over shops and the 20-year limit that there is on residential leaseholds?
Secretary.
That's certainly material that the Government will carefully examine. As Claire Baker will recall, in the budget last year I set out the provisions that would be put in place, in which Mr Mackay has now announced, to enable the utilisation of existing properties within town centres that no longer have a retail function or could be of appeal to the retail market, to be transformed into accommodation that could be used to repopulate town centres. So the Government has already taken steps to encourage this process. We will see the fruits of the work that Mr Mackay has announced to consider exactly what further steps are required to be taken. But we do believe, and it's actually a point that I discussed last week with the Fife Economic Partnership in our consideration of the issues around the role of town centres, of the importance of providing more reasons to increase the level of footfall within town centres and to encourage greater activity within those town centres.
Thanks. Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I, as a regular visitor to Dunfermline, ask the Cabinet Secretary how the forced replacement crossing is benefiting Fife?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I indicated in my answer to Claire Baker, the Queensferry Crossing is currently employing over 700 people, and there are 365 Scottish firms that are benefiting as a consequence of the contractual activity that's underway. The project is currently about 40% complete, and over 75% of the contractor's procurement has been completed. And of course, Mr Kidd will be aware that the Government announced that we are able to deliver the Queensferry crossing for a lower budget than we had anticipated as a consequence of the effective contract management that the Government has put in place as a result of our planning for the project.
Many thanks. Annabel Ewing with reference to Fife, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what collective savings SMEs in Fife have made as a result of this SNP Scottish Government's business rate package?
Cabinet Secretary.
On an annual basis, the business rates relief package the Government presides over saves businesses in Scotland about £570 million in reduced business rates that would be levied. In Fife, over 5,500 business properties currently benefit from the Small Business Bonus Scheme and have saved almost £36 million in business rates taxation since the Small Business Bonus Scheme was introduced by this Government. So, by putting in place a business rates relief package totalling £570 million per annum, the Government does a significant amount to assist businesses in the Kingdom of Fife, and also recognises that we deliver the most competitive proposition on business rates in any part of the United Kingdom, which I think is a point to be welcomed by Parliament today.
Many thanks. Question 11, Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the United Kingdom Government regarding economic development.
Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, Scottish Government ministers and officials are in regular contact with their counterparts in the UK Government about a range of issues affecting economic development. These include the proposed small business strategy being developed by the Department for Business Innovation and Skills, the Start-up Loan Scheme and its extension to Scotland, and European structural programmes as examples of current areas of discussion.
Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary very much for that answer. He will be aware of the call which has been made by Glasgow City Council for a greater role for local authorities in economic development, and of the proposal that both the UK and Scottish Governments should work together with the City Council and other local authorities in the region to develop a city deal for Glasgow similar to that agreed for comparable cities in England. Can he indicate whether he is supportive of this approach, recognising as it does the importance of city regions as major drivers to the Scottish and indeed United Kingdom economies?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think much of this ground has been covered by two things. Firstly, the work that the Scottish Government has taken forward over a number of years on the Scottish Cities Alliance, which has been designed to assist to recognise the significance of cities and their role in the wider economy and to encourage and facilitate their development. And secondly, by the significant flexibility that has been allocated to local authorities by this Government's decision to reduce very significantly ring-fencing of local authority activity. When I became the Finance Minister in Scotland, ring-fencing of local authority funding stood at £2.7 billion. It now stands at £0.2 billion. So there is very significant flexibility being awarded to local authorities to enable them to take steps forward. I would also remind Mr Smith that in the last Parliament, the Government agreed with local authorities that local authorities would be primarily responsible for local economic development. So, under the existing arrangements, there is absolutely nothing to stop cities such as the City of Glasgow contributing to the work on economic development and to fulfilling their ambitions within the flexible framework that has been created by the Scottish Government.
Many thanks. Question 12, Linda Fabiani.
To ask the Scottish Government when it last met South Lanarkshire Council to discuss economic development.
Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, ministers and officials regularly meet local authorities across Scotland to discuss a range of issues, including supporting economic growth.
Linda Fabiani.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that and ask him if he agrees with me that it is vital that South Lanarkshire Council prioritises economic development in East Kilbride, so that the town's position as Lanarkshire's most successful business location is maintained? And will he also assure me, therefore, that Scottish Government support for the work of East Kilbride Task Force is ongoing?
Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I certainly acknowledge the issues that are raised by Linda Fabiani. She's put these points to ministers on a number of occasions, and the role of the task force that was established by South Lanarkshire Council is crucial in taking forward this area of work. The Scottish Government's interests in this respect are represented by the participation of a Senior Director of Business Infrastructure from Scottish Enterprise on the East Kilbride Task Force. And of course, we welcome the focus of the task force, which has been on supporting employability programmes, on ensuring training activities can be undertaken, on the improvement to town centre facilities and a variety of other projects which I'm sure will assist in strengthening the position of East Kilbride as the main retail centre within Lanarkshire, and the Government will continue to engage on this project through the channel that I set out in my answer.
Many thanks. Question 13, Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its position is in the findings of the second report of the Fiscal Commission Working Group.
Secretary John Swinney.
The Scottish Government is grateful for the work undertaken by the experts on the Working Group in developing their proposals for a stabilisation fund and long-term savings fund. As the Working Group have highlighted, of the world's top 20 oil producers, only the UK and Iraq do not operate some form of recognised sovereign wealth fund. With more than half the wholesale value of North Sea oil and gas still to be extracted, there is an overwhelming case for the Government of an independent Scotland to establish the two funds in question. The Working Group's report sets out a framework that will help to maximise the economic opportunity that Scotland's oil and gas wealth presents. Their proposals would ensure that it provides a lasting benefit for future generations and puts to rest any fears around oil price fluctuations impacting on future Scottish budgets.
Thanks. Bill Kidd.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the very full response. Can I ask if any thought has been given to how it's possible that an establishment for a fund for future generations to benefit the Scottish people along the lines of that established in Norway will actually deliver to people in the whole of Scotland?
The Working Group have set out a detailed model for the operation of a long-term savings fund, which would be essentially in place to ensure that future generations benefited from the oil wealth that is generated in the current environment. The purpose of the Savings Fund is, of course, to ensure that there is an opportunity for long-term benefits to be realised to the population of Scotland, and that would be for future administrations to determine as to how that would be allocated and taken forward. What I think is important to realise is that if, as the Fiscal Commission point out, Scotland had some form of long-term investment fund, we would be dealing with the situation where we would have an oil fund that would be valued in excess of £80 to £100 billion, and that would be a significant strengthening of the public finances of an independent Scotland.
Thanks. Question 14, Jane Baxter.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on progress on the proposed Community Empowerment and Renewal Bill.
Minister Derek Mackay.
The First Minister announced in the programme for government that the Community Empowerment and Renewal Bill will form a key part of this year's legislative programme. We intend to publish a consultation on the draft bill in November.
Jane Baxter.
I thank the Minister for that answer and for his earlier comments on empty properties in town centres. The Minister will be aware of my long-standing interest in the problems facing many local authorities in tackling dilapidated buildings and the negative impact such neglected properties have on the local community. Whilst it's right that the majority of the financial burden of tackling dilapidated properties should fall upon the owner, many property owners are currently failing to raise the necessary finance in the current financial climate for repairs. Will the Minister take the ongoing problems faced by local authorities in tackling derelict buildings into account when bringing forward the legislation, and do so as soon as possible?
Minister.
Yes, I will. The Government will certainly consider that, and it would be our intention to take that forward in the consultation for the bill as proposed that we will consult on. And the member has asked about the timescales of the bill. This is a year-free piece of legislation and is in keeping with the parliamentary timetable. I believe that we will not just fulfil our manifesto commitment but surpass the manifesto commitment. We've got great support on this bill with the reference group, and we're working in partnership with COSLA as well. This is an empowering government, and I think this will be an empowering bill, and I thank Jane Baxter for her interest, and so too David Stewart, who has also got an interest in this particular issue.
Thank you. Question 15, Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how its economic policy protects family budgets.
To John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has taken positive action to help support hard-pressed families and protect their budgets. These include measures such as freezing the council tax, maintaining free personal and nursing care, the removal of prescription charges and the provision of free eye examinations, an increase in free nursery provision, the abolition of tuition fees, a minimum income for students, the education maintenance allowance and the maintenance of the concessionary travel scheme for both the disabled as well as older members of our society. The Scottish Government is also helping those households on the lowest incomes and is leading by example by ensuring all public sector staff under our direct responsibility receive a living wage which is above the statutory minimum wage and encourages all other employers to do the same.
Annabel Ewing.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his very comprehensive answer. Could he let us know what impact these excellent SNP Scottish Government policies are having specifically on family budgets in Fife?
Cabinet Secretary.
The first point I'd make is that I would counsel the opposition against scoffing about the genuine commitments that are made to support hard-pressed families at this particular time. Over the duration of this Parliament, on the council tax freeze alone for Band D properties, householders will save £1,200 over the duration of this Parliament at a time when costs are rising and individuals are looking to the Scottish Government to provide them with practical support. Specifically in terms of the council tax freeze, the average Fife Council Band D household should expect to save around £1,450 due to this policy by the end of the 2016-17 period. That, of course, is in addition to the economic benefit that people in Fife will have experienced as a consequence of this administration being the administration that abolished toll charges on the Forth and Tay bridges. Now, I understand that one of the great dinosaurs of the Labour Party got rather confused and thought that the Labour Party had abolished tolls on the Forth and Tay bridges, but I am delighted to confirm to Parliament for the recollection of one of Labour's great dinosaurs that it was an SNP government that abolished tolls on the Forth and Tay road bridges.
Jenny Mara.
Families in Fife, Presiding Officer, are telling my colleagues every day that they are very keen on Ed Miliband's commitment to an energy price freeze. Will the Finance Secretary commit to the same, a 20-month energy price freeze, if he gets an independent Scotland?
Secretary.
I think what Jenny Mara should do first and foremost is, instead of scoffing at the commitments of this government that have delivered more substantive support to the people of Fife than any possible proposition coming from the leader of the Labour Party, we are very keen to defend the record that we have put forward, which is delivered for the people of Fife, and the people of Fife know the value of an SNP government that is on their side.
Neil Findlay, briefly.
One of the ways to help some of the most hard-pressed families in Fife would be to provide adequate support on the bedroom tax. Will the Minister now sign up to Jackie Bailey's bill?
Cabinet Secretary.
The problem for Neil Findlay in the point that he has just advanced is that there is no legal basis to deliver the type of proposition that he is banging on about. This government is able, as Shelter has quite rightly pointed out, is able to deliver up to £20 million of additional support under the law on discretionary housing payments. And where is the law set? The law, of course, is set by a Tory and Liberal government in London that the Labour Party is quite happy to keep there and to allow them to impose the bedroom tax. So again, before Mr Findlay passes the buck down to his pals in London and allows them to carry on legislating to harm the people of Scotland, Mr Findlay should start realising that the solutions can be delivered in Scotland by the powers of independence.
Many thanks. Question 16, Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government, avenues of redress are available to residents and community councils involved in local authority planning disputes.
Minister Derek Mackay.
Residents and community councils have the opportunity to make representations in respect of planning applications. It is for the Planning Authority to decide how much weight is given to any representation in reaching their decision. Where a decision is made and a resident or community council is dissatisfied, they may seek a judicial review of the decision. Where this is a concern that its procedures may not have been followed correctly, a complaint can be made to the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman.
Sandra White,
I thank the Minister for that reply. Minister, I don't know if you're aware, but I have been contacted by constituents in regards to demolition of tenemental properties in Colebrook Street in my constituency. Permission to demolish was not granted, and when contacting Glasgow City Council, DRS, Glasgow City Council, said it's common practice and that the act of demolition is not their responsibility but other departments. Can I ask the Minister if this is normal practice for local authorities, and any advice he can give local residents would be most welcome in this particular issue?
Minister, briefly.
As the member would be aware, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on individual circumstances, but if the member would care to give me further details, I'll have officials investigate the matter.
Many thanks. And it's now time to move to the next item of business, which is a Health and Sport Committee debate on access to new medicines. I'd invite members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And Mr McNeill, if you are ready, I would invite you to open the debate on behalf of the Health and Sport Committee. You have 14 minutes.